Imagine this. It is 9:30 in the morning, October 19th, 2025. The Louvre, one of the world's great cultural institutions, it's open.
Yeah, doors have just opened.
Tourists are just starting to wander in, probably grabbing maps, totally unaware that just one floor up, a small crew, disguised as construction workers, is starting this, well, incredibly audacious daylight robbery.
Right, and it's so brazen, so blunt. It basically rewrote the book on museum security failures overnight.
And what's really key for you to grasp, I think, is that the method they used, it was the complete opposite of some sleek, high-tech movie heist, wasn't it?
Absolutely. This wasn't about dodging lasers or crawling through vents. This multi-million euro theft of historic French crown jewels.
Yeah.
Well, it was pulled off with a piece of equipment you see pretty much every day if you live in Paris in someone's moving house.
That's the amazing paradox we're diving into today. Our deep dive is focused on this stunning, incredibly fast, and frankly, shockingly low-tech robbery of 8 priceless pieces from the Louvre's Galerie de Paulin. We're talking, what, 88 million, conservatively?
At least. And that's just the monetary value.
Exactly. So our mission here is to understand exactly how these thieves managed this during regular opening hours. And maybe more importantly, what this huge breach tells us about how fragile our priceless cultural heritage can be, especially when maybe security gets a bit complacent.
Yeah, I think looking at all the sources, the main takeaway isn't about some criminal mastermind plot. It's really a devastating exposure of systemic vulnerability. It feels less like a clever caper,
And more like...
More like something that was bound to happen, a predictable consequence almost of warnings that weren't headed and security upgrades that were put off for too long. The simplicity of it was key, yes, but it only worked because the museum knew about these weaknesses. They'd been warned for years.
Okay, let's get into the audacity of it, the timeline, because the speed, that's the first thing that just blows your mind. Happened just 30 minutes after the museum opened its doors.
Right, around 9:3 a.m. CEST. Perfect timing, in a way. Enough people around to create chaos and blend in, but maybe too early for security to be fully ramped up or focused in that specific area.
And the disguise was part of the weapon, you could say?
Totally. Yellow and orange, high-vis vests. Sounds almost laughably simple, but think about it. In Paris, there's always construction. Always renovation happening somewhere.
You just assume they belong there.
Exactly. Those vests, let them move around, even move heavy, maybe unusual-looking equipment, right in plain sight. Nobody bats an eyelid, not security, not the public. It just normalizes their presence.
And the heavy equipment, this is the detail that's just wild. A furniture lift.
Yep. One of those big hydraulic lifts, the ones made by companies like Bucker. Parisian movers use them all the time to get sofas and wardrobes up to first or second floor apartments because the staircases are often too narrow.
It's genius in its absurdity. So they didn't need Mission Impossible gear.
No complex planning in that sense. They just drove this thing up to Louvre, approached from the side facing the Seine River, that's the south side of the building. They extended the lift platform up to a first-story balcony. I think it's called the Balcon de Charles IX historically.
Right, onto the balcony.
And that was the entry point.
Yeah.
Using a standard moving tool like that, it just bypasses all the usual high-security thinking, doesn't it? It exploits expectations about mundane, everyday activities.
So they're on the balcony, 2 of them, faces covered with balaclavas, and then
they use a disc cutter, like an angle grinder, to slice right through a large glass window. That gets them in the Galerie de Paulin.
That must have made a racket. Surely that set off alarms.
Oh, it did. The breach definitely triggered alarms. But the thing is, the internal response just wasn't fast enough.
Because they were incredibly quick inside.
Astonishingly quick. Sources confirm they spent only 4 minutes inside the actual gallery.
Yeah.
4 minutes. They knew exactly where to go. Smashed 2 glass display cases. And apparently they threatened any guards who got close, mostly just by brandishing the power tools they still had. The noise, the aggression, it was enough.
4 minutes inside. Given the security you'd expect around crown jewels, it's almost impossible to process.
And the whole operation, from the lift hitting the balcony to them speeding off, under 8 minutes total.
8 minutes, and the getaway just as brazen, I hear.
Absolutely. They jumped on motor scooters and just zipped away along the banks of the Seine, vanished into the city traffic.
Unbelievable. And wasn't there something about them trying to destroy the lift?
Yeah, sort of a final, almost clumsy act of defiance. They tried to set the lift basket on fire before they left.
Yeah.
Seems it was a pretty poor attempt, didn't really work, maybe intended to destroy fingerprints or something.
And the lift company, Bucker.
Oh, the irony. Bucker apparently found themselves going viral afterwards because their own advertising highlights the speed and quietness of their lifts. The very features that made it the perfect, albeit accidental, tool for this crime. Talk about unintended consequences for their marketing department.
Okay, so that speed, that audacity,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, what did they actually manage to grab in those 4 minutes?
8 pieces. 8 specific pieces of the French crown jewels. The total value, as you said, estimated around 88 million. But, as the prosecutor rightly pointed out pretty quickly, the real loss, the bigger loss, is to France's historical heritage. These aren't just jewels. Their history.
Absolutely. These aren't just random shiny things. They seem to have targeted specific, historically significant sets, right? Things tied to French royalty, the empire.
Exactly. The haul included the tiara, the necklace, and 1 earring from the famous sapphire set. That belonged to Queen Marie Amélie and also Queen Hortense. Very significant pieces.
And they also got the emerald necklace and a pair of emerald earrings from Empress Marie Louise's collection.
That's right. Plus, 2 pieces associated with Empress Eugénie de Montijo, this very elaborate reliquary brooch, and a large diamond corsage bow brooch. So yeah, they seemed focused on these cohesive sets, mostly from the 19th century, linked to these really powerful female figures in French history.
But they almost got away with 9 pieces.
They did. They initially grabbed 9, but, well, maybe luck, maybe just clumsiness in their haste. They dropped 1 piece in the street as they were fleeing.
Which one was it?
The crown of Empress Eugénie. A really iconic piece. It was recovered, thankfully. Damaged, though. Reports suggest they tried to pull it through an opening in the display case that was just too small, and that's how it got damaged.
Oh, no. Can it be fixed?
Initial assessments seem positive, thankfully. Experts think restoration is highly likely. So a small silver lining, perhaps.
Okay, but here's where it gets, I think, really interesting, maybe even baffling, what they didn't take.
Right. This is the crucial part for understanding their possible motives.
They left behind the single most valuable items in that entire gallery. They walked right past the 3 most famous, most valuable, most recognizable diamonds, the Regent, the Sancy, and the Hortensia. The Regent diamond alone is valued at, what, 51 million?
Easily. Possibly more. And they ignored it.
Why? Why skip the literal crown jewel of the crown jewels? That feels counterintuitive for a smash and grab.
It does, until you think about the practicalities of fencing stolen goods. That choice, leaving those famous stones, is probably the biggest clue we have about who these thieves might be, or at least who they might be working for.
How so?
Well, think about it. A massive, unique, internationally famous diamond like the Regent. It's effectively priceless, but also worthless on the black market.
Because it's too famous.
Exactly. It's too hot. It's instantly recognizable anywhere in the world. Every major police force, every insurer, every serious diamond dealer knows exactly what it looks like. Its provenance is meticulously documented. Trying to sell the Regent, or even the Sancy or Hortensia, would be like trying to sell the Mona Lisa. It screams stolen and brings down immense heat. It's basically radioactive material in the criminal underworld.
So high value doesn't mean high liquidity, not for something that famous.
Precisely. The historical tiaras, the necklaces, the brooches, yes, they're collectively worth a fortune, 88 million. But they are much, much easier to dispose of quietly.
How?
They can be broken down, dismantled. The individual sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, they can be removed from their settings. They could potentially be recut slightly to alter their appearance, maybe melted down if it's just the gold setting. Once they're loose stones, they lose their immediate, obvious connection to the stolen piece. They become much harder to trace.
So they become just valuable stones rather than those specific historical jewels.
Right. The thieves chose pieces that were incredibly valuable, yes, but crucially, also disposable or repurposable on the black market. This strongly suggests they weren't just grabbing the shiniest things. It points towards a focused objective. Maybe aiming for discrete sales to a very specific, very narrow group of, let's say, unethical elite collectors. Or maybe just planning to break them down for the raw materials. Either way, it wasn't about grabbing the single biggest price tag.
Which is fascinating. And that detail, that choice, leads us right back to the security context, doesn't it? The fact that maybe not super sophisticated criminals could pull this off with basic tools.
Well, it says a lot about the vulnerabilities they found.
It really does. This theft didn't just happen out of the blue. The Louvre, like many old institutions, has a history here.
We mentioned the Mona Lisa theft back in 1911. That took 2 years to recover.
Right. And more recently, in 1998, a Corot painting, Le Chemin de Sèvres, was stolen. It's actually still missing. And even back then, the museum director at the time was already publicly warning that the security situation was, quote, fragile. So this isn't a new problem. These warnings were there.
They were, and they seem to have ramped up just before this 2025 heist. The director at the time, Laurence Descartes, she clearly recognized there were issues. She'd actually requested a full, comprehensive security audit from the Paris police.
Okay, so they did an audit. What happened?
Well, the audit happened, recommendations were made, but here's the devastating part. Those recommendations were only just starting to be implemented when the thieves hit. The timing was just fatal. That lag, that delay in acting on the known risks created the window.
Wow. And was there pressure from inside the museum, too, about security?
Oh, definitely. You had labor unions, like the Union Syndical Solidaires, being very vocal for a while. They were complaining publicly that security was being systematically weakened by ongoing staff cuts.
Staff cuts at the Louvre.
Apparently so. They used the phrase, destruction of security jobs. And this was happening at a time when visitor numbers were soaring. So you had this tension. More focus on managing crowds, getting people through the doors, maybe at the expense of robust behind-the-scenes artifact protection.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It proved to be. And the final, terrible confirmation came after the robbery, when Director Descartes had to testify before the Senate Committee on Culture.
What did she say?
She confirmed the critical flaw. She admitted that parts of the building's exterior weren't adequately covered by surveillance cameras.
You're kidding. Which parts?
Specifically, the exact wall where the thieves used the lift to get up to that first-story balcony, the balcony to Charles IX. There was effectively no camera coverage watching that precise spot.
A complete blind spot.
A complete, fatal blind spot. She called it a terrible failure in her testimony to the Senate. And whether that blind spot was there because it was architecturally tricky to cover, or just bureaucratic oversight or budget cuts, the result was the same. The thieves found it or knew about it and exploited this known vulnerability using the most ordinary tools imaginable.
And you mentioned this wasn't just happening at the Louvre. Other places were hit, too.
Yeah, the sources point to a worrying trend around that time, 2024 into 2025. Other major French cultural institutions were targeted. The Cognac J Museum in Paris, the Agent de Boucher National Porcelain Museum in Limoges, even the National Museum of Natural History in Paris suffered a significant gold theft just about a month before the Louvre heist.
So it suggests maybe a broader issue, a sort of vulnerability across the board in France's heritage security at that moment.
It certainly raises that question. Maybe criminals sensed a weakness, or maybe budget cuts and staffing issues were having a wider impact than just at the Louvre. It painted a picture of heritage sites being perhaps less secure than everyone assumed.
Okay, so the heist happens. It's a massive shock. What about the investigation? Did they get anywhere?
Well, the response was huge and immediate, as you'd expect. The Interior Minister put over 100 investigators on the case right away. Forensics teams swarmed the scene. They collected apparently over 150 pieces of evidence.
Like what?
Everything from fingerprints, DNA traces, presumably from the tools, maybe the lift, the discarded helmet, to the actual power tools left behind, a blowtorch, even a walkie-talkie. They had a lot to work with.
And did that lead to arrests?
Surprisingly quickly, yes. Just 6 days after the robbery, on October 25th, they arrested 2 men, both in their 30s.
6 days? That's fast.
It really is. One of them was actually detained right at Charles de Gaulle Airport. He was apparently trying to board a flight out of the country.
Cutting it fine. How did they link them?
Trey's DNA seems to have been key. DNA recovered from a helmet found near the scene reportedly matched one of these suspects. That was the breakthrough.
So 2 arrests initially. Anyone else?
In total, 4 suspects have now been charged. There was a woman arrested a bit later as well. And apparently 2 of the men arrested, the first guys who, reports say, were already known to police for previous burglaries, have partially admitted some involvement.
Partially admitted. What are the charges?
They're facing charges of organized gang theft and criminal conspiracy. Serious charges.
The jewels themselves. The $88 million worth.
Still missing. That's the big question mark hanging over everything. Despite the arrests, the location of the stolen pieces remains completely unknown.
Wow. So what happened at the Louvre immediately after? They must have closed.
Oh, yeah, closed immediately. Interpol was notified. The stolen items were added to their international database of stolen artworks. And interestingly, as a major precaution, other highly valuable jewels that were still at the Louvre were physically moved out of the museum.
Moved to where?
To the vaults of the Bank of France. Presumably considered a more secure location in the immediate aftermath. It shows the level of shock and concern, doesn't it? Taking treasures out of the museum itself for safekeeping.
Absolutely. And the political fallout, you mentioned the government earlier.
Swift and pretty brutal.
Oh, yeah.
President Macron condemned it, of course,
Mm.
and ordered an immediate speeding up of those security recommendations from the audit that had been delayed. Closing the stable door after the horses bolted, perhaps?
But the opposition must have jumped on this.
Oh, completely. It was prime political ammunition. Opposition leaders, people like Jordan Bardella from the National Rally, Eric Ciotti from the UDR party, they launched really scathing attacks on the government.
What did they say?
They called the robbery a humiliation for France, a profound symbol of collapse for national institutions. They basically used it as proof that the government wasn't capable of maintaining order or protecting the nation's heritage. It became a symbol of wider alleged state failure.
So if we try and pull this all together, synthesize this whole incredible story, we're left with this central paradox, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
You have this priceless historical collection, housed in arguably the world's most famous museum, a global cultural icon, protected, you'd think, by layers of security, bureaucracy, history itself.
And yet,
It's defeated by a small team wearing cheap construction vests, using a standard moving lift and a basic power tool. And they do it all in less time than it takes you to, I don't know, stand in line and grab a coffee at the museum cafe.
that low-tech aspect, that's the thing that sticks with you, isn't it? That's
Right.
the enduring lesson here. And it circles back to what the prosecutor apparently believed early on,
Which was?
that the thieves were likely petty criminals, not organized professionals. Now, whether that initial assessment holds up completely, we don't know. But if they were relatively unsophisticated, well, that just makes the systemic security failures look even worse, even harder to excuse.
Because the system wasn't beaten by genius.
Exactly. It was potentially beaten by simple opportunism, hitting a known vulnerability. A vulnerability that had been flagged, discussed, audited, but ultimately not fixed in time. The system was just sort of waiting for someone to try the obvious thing.
Which is a chilling thought for any museum director. But okay, that leaves us with one final, really intriguing question for you, the listener, to think about.
The big why, right?
Exactly. Considering they risked so much and assuming, just for argument's sake, that the initial assessment was right, that they were relatively small-time criminals, why? Why did they deliberately ignore the world-famous 51 million Regent diamond, the one piece that represented the absolute maximum monetary value right there in front of them?
And instead, they chose that specific set of historical tiaras, necklaces, brooches.
So was that choice purely practical? Was it just about the ease of breaking down those pieces, fencing the high-quality historical gems quietly, maybe to a specific, discreet collector who wanted those items? Or does it suggest something else? Does it hint that maybe they weren't so petty after all, that perhaps they received highly targeted instructions from a much bigger, more sophisticated criminal organization than the police initially suspected, an organization that knew exactly what it wanted and why? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are pulling apart the Hollywood mythology surrounding probably the most famous and maybe most misunderstood international law enforcement body out there, the International Criminal Police Organization. You know it as Interpol.
Right.
And when most people think of Interpol, you probably imagine these like globe-trotting super agents, flashing badges, kicking down doors, making arrests across borders.
Yeah, the movie version.
Exactly. Let's just, get that out of the way immediately. Interpol is not a supranational agency. They don't have agents with arresting powers. They aren't above national law.
Not at all. It's an international organization, basically a critical network that links the national police forces of 196 member states. Think about that, 196. That's actually more nations than are in the UN.
Wow. Okay. So a network.
Primarily, yes. An administrative body, really, and a huge data clearinghouse. So our mission for this deep dive is to understand its true role, which is vital, don't get me wrong, facilitating police cooperation, crime control against big threats like terrorism, cybercrime.
The stuff that crosses borders easily.
Precisely. But, and this is crucial, we also need to really examine the immense pressure on its core constitutional commitment. Its promise to be politically neutral.
Oh, right.
And how that system, well, frankly, how it has been and continues to be severely tested, weaponized, even by some powerful member states.
Weaponized. Okay. That sounds
It
serious.
is. So we'll explore the organization's surprising history, and parts of it are genuinely shocking. We'll detail its actual operational tools, like the famous notices, and we have to confront the very serious accusations that certain governments are essentially turning this global network into a tool for transnational political repression.
Right. Targeting opponents across borders using Interpol's own systems.
That's the allegation we need to unpack.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Where did it come from?
Well, the official birth date is September 7, 1923, founded in Vienna, Austria. Back then it was called the International Criminal Police Commission, the ICPC.
ICPC, okay. And why then? What was the driver?
It really wasn't some grand idealistic project initially. It was pure necessity. You had this explosion of international travel, commerce in the early 20th century.
Right. Trains, ships, borders became more porous.
Exactly. And that meant criminals, fugitives, they could just skip across a border and poof, escape jurisdiction. So the police forces realized they needed a way to share information centrally. It became paramount.
Makes sense. A practical solution to a practical problem.
But you know what's fascinating and deeply troubling is how quickly that necessity, that practical idea, turned into, well, a tragedy.
How so?
Because after the Anschluss in 1938, when Nazi Germany annexed Austria, the Vienna-based ICPC fell completely under Nazi control.
Wait, completely?
Completely. They moved the headquarters from Vienna to Berlin. And get this, they located it in the same building as the Gestapo.
No. Really? In the Gestapo
It's
building?
staggering, isn't it? That
Yeah.
transition from this fledgling international crime-fighting body to being functionally embedded within, a profoundly criminal regime.
That's hard to even process.
It is absolutely the organization's darkest chapter.
Yeah.
All the presidents of the ICPC during that period, 1938 to 1945, were high-ranking SS generals,
SS generals running an international police commission.
including Ernst Kaltenbrunner, one of the main architects of the Holocaust, later hanged at Nuremberg, he was president of the ICPC.
Unbelievable. So what was it even doing then?
Well, it wasn't doing international police cooperation. It was essentially used to help track down political opponents, Jews, others targeted by the regime. As an international body, it was completely stagnant, basically dead, until the end of World War II.
So captured by the SS. Okay, how did it come back from that?
Well, after the war, it was quickly revived, mainly by officials from France, Belgium, the UK. In 1946, they set up new headquarters in Paris. Eventually, it moved to Lyon, where it is today.
And that's when the name changed?
Not immediately. The name Interpol actually came from its telegraphic address, like a short code for sending messages. That started in 46, but they didn't formally adopt Interpol as the common name until 1956, a decade later.
Right. So rebuilt, rebranded. What's its core job now? What does it say it does?
Today, its mandate is clear. Provide investigative support, expertise, training, all aimed at fighting transnational crime. The big ones: terrorism, cybercrime, organized crime, financial crime.
Okay, the global threats.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the fundamental tension, the thing that shapes almost every controversy around Interpol, is baked right into its foundational law, Article 3 of its Constitution.
Article 3, what does it say?
This is the critical constraint. It strictly forbids Interpol from undertaking any intervention or activities of a political, military, religious, or racial character.
Ah, absolute neutrality.
Supposedly absolute, and you see why they put that in, right? Given that Nazi history, it's almost bitterly ironic.
Yeah, you go from being run by the SS to saying absolutely no politics, religion, race.
Exactly. They had to adopt this absolute commitment to neutrality to regain any kind of legitimacy after the war. It's the foundation stone, promising all 196 members that their police forces are just focused on, well, ordinary crime.
But you said earlier this is the rule that gets tested, even broken.
It's the rule that is most frequently challenged, and yes, critics would say systematically broken. That's where the modern problems really lie.
Okay, so let's put aside the Hollywood image again. How does this network, this administrative body, actually work day to day if they can't arrest people? What's their power?
Their power is information and communication, data.
Okay.
Their key technical tool is something called the I-247 network. Think of it as a secure, encrypted, internet-based communication system.
I-247.
Right. It gives police forces in all member countries constant round-the-clock access to Interpol's massive global databases.
What kind of databases?
Huge collections. Things like authorized DNA samples from crime scenes, fingerprints, and critically, their database of lost and stolen travel documents, passports, visas. That one alone holds over 12 million records.
12 million. So if you're a border agent somewhere, anywhere in the world, checking a passport.
there's a very good chance you are pinging that Interpol database in real time. It's like the global nervous system for international law enforcement checks.
Wow. Okay, that's significant power right there, just through information access.
Absolutely. And this data system, this I-24/7 network, is what enables the famous warning system everyone talks about, the notices.
Right, the color-coded notices. Red notice is the one everyone knows.
That's the most famous, yes. A red notice basically means a person is wanted by a member country for prosecution or to serve a sentence based on a valid arrest warrant or court decision. It's a request to locate and provisionally arrest an individual pending extradition.
Pending extradition. So it's not an international arrest warrant itself.
No, that's a key distinction. It's a request to member countries to arrest someone based on the requesting country's warrant. Each country decides for itself whether to act on it based on their own laws. But yeah, red notices are for wanted persons. Then you have yellow notices.
What are those?
Yellow notices are for missing persons, often minors or people unable to identify themselves. It's about locating victims or finding people who are missing.
Okay, that's different. More humanitarian.
Exactly. And the other colors show the real breadth. A black notice, for example, is issued to seek information on unidentified bodies. Think disaster victim identification or finding remains. It's essential work.
Okay.
And an orange notice, that's a warning. It warns police and other international organizations about an event, a person, an object, or a process that represents a serious and imminent threat to public safety, like maybe a new type of disguised bomb or a modus operandi for criminals.
So they're not just tracking fugitives, they're actively coordinating global warnings about potential dangers.
That's a huge part of their function. They also have blue for additional information on someone related to a crime, green for warnings about known criminals likely to reoffend elsewhere, purple for info on criminal methods, and a special one for the UN related to sanctions. It's a whole system.
It's complex. Can you give us a sense of scale? Like, how many red notices are out there?
Well, the numbers fluctuate, obviously, but to give you an idea, as of 2019, Interpol reported having over 62,000 valid red notices circulating globally.
62,000. That's a massive list of people who could potentially be stopped at any border crossing in the world.
It is. And around 12,000 yellow notices for missing persons active at that time, too. The scale is huge.
And where does all this coordination happen? Is it all in Lyon?
Lyon is the General Secretariat, the HQ. But they've expanded quite a bit. They now have the Interpol Global Complex for Innovation, the IGCI, based in Singapore.
Innovation? What does that focus on?
That's their hub, dedicated entirely to fighting digital crimes, cyber threats, online child exploitation, providing digital forensic support. Given how much crime has moved online, it's a critical center.
Makes sense.
And they also have command and coordination centers operating 24/7, not just in Lyon, but also in Buenos Aires and, again, Singapore, to provide operational support across different time zones. They can deploy incident response teams from these hubs to assist member countries after major attacks or during complex investigations.
So, a distributed global network. But you mentioned earlier, all of this relies on cooperation and that neutrality promise.
Exactly. Every single database entry, every notice issued, every team deployed it, all rests on the foundation of Article 3, that political neutrality. And that's where things get, well, really complicated.
Okay, let's get into that. This is where you said the conversation gets really interesting and potentially quite disturbing. The history of leadership, the misuse of the system, this constant tension around Article 3.
Yes, because if your whole mission statement is, we are politically neutral, but the organization is run by political appointees from member states and funded by those states, well, there's an inherent vulnerability right there, isn't there?
It seems unavoidable.
And you don't have to look far back to see the issues. We talked about the Nazi era, but even after the post-war revival, the problems didn't just vanish. Take Paul Dickoff. He was president from 1968 to 1972.
Okay.
He was elected despite the fact that he was a former SS officer. He had actually worked in that same Gestapo shared building in Berlin during the Nazi era.
Wait, after the war, they elected a former SS officer as president?
They did. It strongly suggests that the political cleansing, the denazification within the organization was, let's say, incomplete at best.
That's quite an understatement. Okay, so historical baggage. What about more recently?
Oh, the pattern continues, but maybe driven more by modern political maneuvering and, frankly, corruption. Fast forward to the 2000s, you had Jackie Celebi, South Africa's national police chief. He was Interpol president from 2004 to 2008.
Celebi, right? I remember that name.
Yeah, he had to resign. Why? Because he was charged and later convicted back home in South Africa for corruption. specifically for taking bribes about 156,000 euros from a known convicted drug trafficker he was supposed to be investigating.
The head of Interpol taking bribes from a drug lord.
Not a good look, is it?
Not at all. And after him.
Well, following Salebi, eventually we get to Meng Hongwei. He was a senior politician from the People's Republic of China, Vice Minister of Public Security, elected Interpol president in 2016.
Ah, the Chinese president who disappeared.
Exactly, that's the one. He famously vanished during a trip back to China in 2018. Total silence for weeks. Then Beijing confirmed he'd been detained, arrested on charges of taking over $2 million in bribes.
$2 million.
That was the accusation. He was subsequently expelled from the Chinese Communist Party, and Interpol announced they'd received his resignation, presumably tendered while he was detained.
So back-to-back presidents leaving under clouds of corruption or political intrigue.
And it doesn't stop there. Then you have the most recent and arguably most controversial election. The current president, Ahmed Nasser al-Raisi, a general from the United Arab Emirates, elected in 2021.
Right, I remember the outcry around that election.
Huge outcry. Highly protested by human rights groups, by parliamentarians across Europe, Germany, France. Why? Because of very serious, credible accusations of torture leveled against him personally, relating to his role in the UAE security services.
Torture allegations against the head of the world's police cooperation body.
Specifically relating to the UAE's troubling human rights record, the alleged unlawful detention and abuse of political opponents, both Emirati and foreign nationals. His election sent shockwaves through the human rights community.
That is just a staggering series of leaders. It shows vulnerability to, historical compromises, but also very modern political power plays and alleged corruption.
Absolutely. But as bad as these leadership scandals are, they might actually be symptoms of a deeper problem. The biggest issue, the real aha moment for understanding the current crisis, is the widespread system abuse.
System abuse, you mean?
The practice of non-democratic states, authoritarian regimes, deliberately weaponizing Interpol's own mechanisms, especially the red notices for what's called transnational repression.
Using Interpol to hunt down dissidents, journalists, political opponents who fled abroad.
Precisely. Using the legitimacy and the reach of the Interpol network to extend their own internal repression across borders. And critics argue it's happening systematically, on a large scale, and it's eroding the credibility of the entire system.
Which countries are we talking about primarily?
Yeah, several countries are frequently cited by human rights groups and researchers. Russia, for instance, has been accused of being responsible for a truly staggering proportion of Interpol's public red notices. One study suggested as high as 38%.
38% from one country.
That was the finding for public notices, yes.
Yeah.
And there's strong evidence they consistently target political critics, exiled business figures who fell out with the Kremlin, Ukrainian figures. They essentially seem to treat Interpol as an extended arm of their domestic political policing.
Wow. Okay. Who else?
China is another major focus of concern. Accused of using Interpol notices, and the throat of them, to target Uyghurs living abroad, particularly those advocating for Uyghur rights. Human rights organizations have tracked, over 1,500 cases of detention or deportation of Uyghurs back to China since 1997, often facilitated by cooperation allegedly prompted by these kinds of alerts.
And you mentioned the UAE earlier with the presidency.
Yes, and beyond the presidency controversy, there are also serious concerns about financial influence. The UAE, through its Interpol Foundation for a Safer World, has donated enormous sums of money. One figure cited was $54 million.
$54 million.
Yes, and critics point out that this amount was estimated to be roughly equal to the combined statutory contributions of all the other 194 member states put together.
Equal to everyone else combined. That sounds like an attempt to buy influence, doesn't it?
That's exactly the accusation, that such huge discretionary funding from one country, especially one with its own human rights concerns, could potentially compromise Interpol's neutrality in decision-making.
It certainly raises questions.
It absolutely does. And the real human cost of all this alleged abuse is most visible, perhaps, in refugee cases.
How so?
Well, NGOs like Fair Trials International, the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency itself, they've repeatedly flagged this issue. You have individuals who successfully flee persecution from countries like, say, Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Egypt. They manage to get recognized as refugees in a safe country according to international law.
Okay, so they have official refugee status.
Yes. But then they can still be arrested when they try to cross another international border, maybe going on holiday, maybe trying to resettle because their home country has issued a politically motivated red notice against them, often based on trumped-up criminal charges.
Even though they're recognized refugees.
Exactly. And even if the courts in the arresting country ultimately refuse extradition, which they often do, recognizing the political nature of the charges, the simple act of being flagged by Interpol, arrested, detained, sometimes for weeks or months, it shatters lives. It restricts their freedom of movement, causes immense trauma, and serves the repressive aims of the country they fled.
So the notice itself becomes the punishment, even without extradition.
In many cases, yes. The process becomes the punishment. It creates a climate of fear for exiled activists and dissidents globally.
Okay, this paints a pretty grim picture of potential misuse. Given all this criticism, this weight of evidence, what is Interpol actually doing about it? Are they trying to reform?
Well, they say they are. There's been mounting pressure, definitely. You've had parliamentary assemblies across Europe, national governments, NGOs, all demanding action to protect the system's integrity and that core neutrality principle.
So what's the response been inside Interpol?
Interpol has implemented some reforms. They established a dedicated working group on the processing of information back in 2015. Its job was to review the mechanisms, try and strengthen the review process for notices before they get circulated.
Trying to filter out the politically motivated requests up front.
That's the idea. They've introduced enhanced checks, particularly looking at whether a request complies with Article 3 and whether the subject might have refugee status. They created a specific policy on refugees in 2016.
Okay, so some steps have been taken.
Yes, but critics, like Fair Trials and others, argue these changes simply don't go far enough. They say the review process is still too opaque, too slow, and lacks real teeth when it comes to holding abusing states accountable.
What are these groups proposing, though? What would stronger reforms look like?
Their proposals are generally quite clear. First, they want a much faster, more effective mechanism to automatically protect individuals who have already been granted refugee status from the very country that's issuing the red notice. It seems like a basic safeguard, right?
Yeah, if someone's officially a refugee from country X shouldn't be able to get them arrested via Interpol.
You'd think. Second, they demand real enforcement.
Well,
Sanctions or suspensions for member states that are found to frequently and demonstrably abuse the system for political ends. Right now, the consequences seem minimal.
So accountability for the states abusing the system.
Exactly. And third, much greater transparency around the entire review process, how decisions are made, what criteria are used, and how individuals can effectively challenge wrongly issued notices.
Okay, makes sense. Protect refugees, punish abusers, be more transparent.
Those are the core demands from the reform advocates.
And there's one other issue you mentioned briefly, the diplomatic side, Taiwan.
Ah, yes. That's another layer showing how politics inevitably shapes this supposedly neutral platform. Taiwan, despite being a stable democracy with a major economy and significant travel flows, has been repeatedly excluded even from having observer status at Interpol meetings,
Why?
primarily due to pressure from the People's Republic of China, which claims Taiwan as part of its territory. This exclusion happened after Interpol transferred recognition from Taipei to Beijing back in 1984.
Even though other countries support Taiwan's inclusion.
Yes, there's been strong and consistent support, particularly from the U.S. Congress, arguing that excluding Taiwan creates a dangerous gap in global law enforcement cooperation, potentially impacting things like counterterrorism or cybercrime information sharing. But the political reality of China's influence within Interpol has so far prevented their participation.
So even who gets to be in the room is politically determined.
It highlights how even the basic structure and membership are subject to these high-stakes diplomatic battles between powerful nations, undermining that neutrality ideal again.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it feels like there's this fundamental contradiction at the heart of Interpol.
I think that's the best way to put it. You have this central tension, right? On one hand, Interpol is, without doubt, the world's largest and arguably most essential platform for global police cooperation. It is vital for tackling genuine transnational crimes. Terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, cybercrime, the things that really do pose global risks.
I need something like it.
We probably do. Yet on the other hand, it constantly struggles to enforce its own constitutional limits. It's forever battling to remain politically neutral while simultaneously relying completely on the data, the trust, and crucially, the financial contributions from the very governments that, in some cases, are actively seeking to weaponize the system against their own political opponents.
It's walking a tightrope.
A very precarious one. The reality seems to be that Interpol is only as impartial, only as effective in upholding Article 3 as its most powerful member states allow it to be.
So its success really hinges on its ability and its willingness to enforce that neutrality against these immense political pressures and maybe even against the financial influence we talked about.
Can the organization bite the hand that feeds it, essentially? That's the big, maybe $54 million question.
Yeah, a tough position to be in. All right, let's leave our listeners with something to think about, a final provocative thought based on everything we've discussed.
Okay?
Given what you said earlier, that one country, Russia, has been accused of being responsible for nearly 40% of the Puppetsnur. Red notices, what does that tell us about the system? What is the actual moral cost of maintaining this platform for global law enforcement cooperation when such a significant chunk of its most visible output might be politically tainted? Where do you, as a listener, draw the line between the necessity of fighting international crime and the risk of facilitating transnational political oppression?
The heavy question.
It is. Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling really one of the most famous, maybe infamous, art crimes ever. The theft of the Mona Lisa back in 1911.
Right, and we've been looking at the sources not just to, map out the crime itself, but to really get inside the head of the thief, Vincenzo Peruggia.
Yeah, and how these 2 years he spent with the painting basically hiding in his apartment, how that whole bizarre episode turned the artwork into this global superstar. It's quite a story.
It really is, because the theft itself, it was huge news, obviously, but it did something fundamental to the painting's status. Before 1911, sure, art experts knew it, loved it.
But not like today. Not everyone on the planet knowing that smile.
Exactly. It wasn't that universal icon yet. So our mission, if you like, is to unpack how this surprisingly simple act of theft catapulted it into, well, inescapable fame.
And Peruggia himself, the thief. He wasn't some kind of criminal mastermind, was he? The sources paint a very different picture.
Not at all. Vincenzo Peruggia, born in Italy, 1881, came to Paris looking for work like so many others. He was a handyman, basically, a glazier, decorator, and he did work briefly at the Louvre itself around 1908 onwards.
Ah, okay. So that's the connection. He wasn't just some outsider.
That's the absolute key. That job gave him, well, critical inside knowledge. Some research even suggests he was part of the team that actually built the protective glass case, the box frame for the Mona Lisa.
So he knew the setup. He knew the security, or lack thereof, maybe.
He knew exactly how it was fixed to the wall, how it was protected, and more importantly, how to bypass it.
Right. So we have this decorator, not a master thief, with insider access. And the sources call it the greatest art theft of the 20th century, which sounds grand, but the way he did it seems almost simple.
Almost laughably simple in retrospect. Okay, so picture this. Monday, August 21st, 1911. It's around 7 a.m.
Okay.
Monday was the museum's closing day back then for cleaning, maintenance, plus it was the summer holidays. The place was practically empty except for staff.
Makes sense. Fewer eyes.
Exactly. And Peruggia just walks in through an employee entrance. He's wearing the standard uniform, a white worker's smock.
So he just blended right in. Invisible.
Completely. Just another guy showing up to work. He made his way to the Salon Carré. That's the gallery where the Mona Lisa hung.
And it was just hanging there? How was it secured?
4 simple iron pegs holding it to the wall. He just lifted it off. No alarms, nothing like that back then for something like this.
Okay, so he's got the painting. Now what? He can't just walk out with it like that.
No, it's bulky, framed. He needed somewhere quiet. He went to this little used service staircase, this up meters. That was his moment.
Right, to get rid of the frame and stuff.
Yeah, he had some basic tools. He quickly took off the heavy wooden frame and the protective glass case it was in. Then he just stashed those behind some canvases, student art, I think, that were stored on the landing there.
Okay, so just the wooden panel painting itself now. And that clears up that mist, doesn't it? The one where he supposedly hid it under his smock.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the painting itself is, 53 by 77 centimeters, roughly 21 by 30 inches. It's painted on a solid piece of wood, remember?
Not exactly foldable.
Not at all. And Peruggia, he was a small guy, only about 5'3". There's no way he's hiding that under a smock.
So what did he do? How did he carry it?
He told the police later he actually took off his white smock, wrapped the painting panel in it, and then just tucked the whole bundle under his arm. Still awkward, but manageable.
Right. Okay, so he's got the painting, he's ditched the frame, he just needs to walk out.
But I read there was a close call, wasn't there? He almost didn't make it out.
Oh, yeah. A huge moment of potential disaster for him. He gets down the service stairs to an exit door leading out to the street, and it's locked.
Oh no, trap!
Completely trapped. Holding the most famous painting in the world wrapped in his work clothes. And then, just sheer, unbelievable luck, a plumber comes walking by.
A plumber? Yeah, just doing his rounds. Sees Peruggia, sees the white smock, figures he's just another worker having trouble with the stuck door handle. And the plumber just unlocks the door for him. No questions asked.
You're kidding. The plumber basically let him out.
Essentially, gave him his getaway. Just like that. Peruggia steps out onto the street, melts into the morning crowd, Mona Lisa under his arm.
That is incredible. Just pure chance. But what's almost more unbelievable is how long it took for anyone inside the Louvre to realize it was gone.
The lack of immediate alarm is pretty staggering, isn't it? It wasn't discovered until Tuesday morning, the next day.
How?
A painter, Louis Barrault, came in. He often set up his easel in the Salon Carré to paint, sometimes copying the masters. He gets there, ready to maybe sketch the Mona Lisa, and there's just an empty space. 4 iron pegs in the wall.
And then the panic starts.
Well, confusion first, then disbelief, then, yes, panic. The museum director was away on holiday. He must have been absolutely horrified when he heard. Apparently he'd boasted not long before that stealing the Mona Lisa would be like trying to steal the towers of Notre Dame.
Famous last words. And wasn't there some unfortunate joke by the arts minister, too?
Oh, yes. Perfectly timed irony. He'd supposedly quipped to his staff something like, "Don't bother me unless the Louvre burns down or the Joconde is stolen." Well,
The Joconde was stolen.
right.
The French name for her. So chaos ensues. What did the police do first?
Pure pandemonium, really. They sealed off the Louvre immediately. 60 police officers descended on the place, searching everywhere. The lead investigator, Monsieur Hamard, I think, was incredibly confident, told the press it would be solved in 2 or 3 days, tops.
Right. And instead, they started looking in some pretty strange directions. Didn't they arrest Picasso?
They did. Bizarrely, yes. Both Pablo Picasso and the poet Guillaume Apollinaire were brought in for questioning. Apollinaire had once called for the Louvre to be burned down, maybe that was it, and Picasso had bought some statues that were actually stolen from the Louvre by Apollinaire's secretary. But it had nothing to do with the Mona Lisa.
Talk about barking up the wrong tree. And searching ships heading to America.
Yeah, they were convinced it was some elaborate international plot, searching ocean liners in Le Havre, checking passengers. Meanwhile, the painting was probably already tucked away in Peruggia's tiny Paris apartment.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The police failures regarding Peruggia himself. They actually came so close, didn't they?
Agonizingly close. And they completely missed it. Okay, first big thing. Remember how Peruggia took the painting out of its protective glass case?
Yeah, on the service stairs?
Well, he left a thumbprint. A really clear thumbprint right on the glass, which the police found when they recovered the discarded frame and case.
Okay, so they had a print.
They did. And here's the kicker. Vincenzo Peruggia's fingerprints and his photo were already on file with the Paris police. He'd been arrested before for some minor offense, I think a dispute with a landlord or something.
Wait, they had his print from the crime scene.
Yeah.
They had his prints already in their records. And he was a former Louvre employee who'd worked specifically on that painting's display. How did they not connect those dots?
It's staggering incompetence, really. The procedure was they fingerprinted all the permanent Louvre staff. But Peruggia, he was considered temporary, an outside contractor, a glazier.
So his name just wasn't on the list they cross-referenced.
Exactly. His prints were in the general police files, but they failed to specifically check the prints of recent temporary workers against those files, or against the print found on the glass. They had the key, like you said, and they just didn't turn it.
That's unbelievable. But it gets worse, doesn't it? They actually talked to him.
Oh, it gets almost comical. The police were interviewing everyone who had worked at the Louvre recently. They went to Peruggia's small, modest apartment, and they questioned him. Not once, but twice.
Twice. With the painting presumably hidden somewhere in the room.
Right there. The sources say he kept it hidden inside a specially modified trunk, maybe with a false bottom or cavity. So the police are in his room asking him questions.
And he just plays dumb.
Completely calm, denies everything. And on the second visit, one of the detectives, apparently satisfied with Peruggia's story, sat down to finish writing his report.
Okay.
Where did he write the report? He apparently leaned on the very table under which sat the trunk containing the stolen Mona Lisa.
No, you're kidding me. Literally leaning on the evidence.
That's what the accounts suggest.
Yeah.
The world's most wanted artwork right under the detective's elbow, and he had no idea.
So Peruggia, through a combination of luck, police incompetence, and maybe some nerve, managed to keep this massive secret for 2 whole years.
2 incredibly long years. And this is where the painting's modern fame really takes off. It's the absence that creates the legend.
Right. People started going to the Louvre just to see the empty space.
Exactly. Thousands of people flocked there just to stare at the blank wall where the Mona Lisa used to be. It became this huge cultural event. The newspapers were having a field day, naturally.
Offering rewards, speculating.
Huge rewards offered, wild theories about who did it. Cartoonists were joking that maybe Arsène Lupin, the fictional gentleman thief, was responsible. The theft itself became bigger news than the painting had ever been.
It's such a paradox, isn't it? The painting achieves this truly global, universal fame, the kind it has today where everyone knows it, precisely because it was stolen and missing, because of this crime.
Absolutely. It was famous within art circles before, but the theft and the media frenzy around it, that made it a household name across the world. It became iconic because it wasn't there.
Okay, so 2 years pass. Peruggia has the painting stashed away. The world is obsessed with the empty space. What finally makes him break cover? Why risk moving it after all that time?
Impatience, maybe. Or perhaps the initial plan, whatever it was, wasn't working out. He started seeing advertisements in Italian newspapers, art dealers looking for pieces.
So he started thinking about selling it or getting it back to Italy.
Both, it seems. He decided to take the painting back to Italy, packed it up, took it on the train to Florence, and checked into a hotel, storing it in his room there.
Okay, risky move.
Very. Then he contacted a well-known Florentine art dealer, a guy named Alfredo Geri. But he didn't use his real name.
He used an alias.
Yeah, he wrote to Geri calling himself Leonardo V, said he had the Mona Lisa and wanted to return it to Italy.
Return it, but not just give it back, right? He wasn't planning on being purely altruistic.
Definitely not. He made it clear to Geri he expected a reward, a substantial payment for bringing the painting back to, as he saw it, its rightful homeland.
So Gary gets this letter. What does he do? Does he believe him?
Geri was intrigued but cautious. He agreed to meet Leonardo V at his gallery. Peruggia shows up with the painting, still hidden in the trunk. Geri, likely stunned but keeping his cool, said he needed an expert to authenticate it.
Smart move.
Very. He called in Giovanni Paggi, who was the director of the famous Uffizi Gallery right there in Florence. They went to Peruggia's hotel room. Peruggia opened the trunk, revealed the false bottom, and there it was.
The real Mona Lisa. Paggi must have known instantly.
Oh, yes. Paggi was an expert. He recognized the panel, the craquelure, the Louvre inventory number on the back. It was genuine. They convinced Peruggia to let them take it to the Uffizi for safekeeping while they arranged his reward.
And Peruggia agreed.
He did. Once the painting was safely secured at the Uffizi, Geri and Paggi immediately called the police. Peruggia was arrested shortly after, back at his hotel. The game was up.
Wow. So after 2 years, just like that, what was the reaction in Italy when the news broke? It must have been huge.
Oh, it was absolute pandemonium. National sensation. Remember, Italy felt a connection to the painting. Banner headlines celebrating its return. The painting itself became a national hero.
Did they put it on display?
They did. Before sending it back to France, they exhibited it all over Italy, Rome, Milan, Florence, of course. Huge crowds turned out. The New York Times ran a headline that gives you a sense of the mania. Florentines in riot over Mona Lisa. Crowd of 30,000 sweeps police aside in mad rush to see stolen painting.
30,000 people rioting to see it. Incredible. Yeah. So a hero's welcome for the painting. But what about Peruggia? Now the focus must have shifted to him. Why did he really do it?
That became the central question at his trial. Was he a patriot? Was he just greedy? Or was he something else entirely?
What was his official defense? He stuck to the patriotism angle, right?
He did, mostly. He claimed he'd learned while working at the Louvre that Napoleon had stolen the painting during his campaigns in Italy. He saw himself as righting a historical wrong, returning Italy's stolen heritage. He even told the court, quite dramatically, "I am an Italian and I do not want the picture given back to the Louvre."
That sounds noble, but it's based on a false premise, isn't it? Napoleon didn't steal the Mona Lisa.
Not at all. That's the big hole in his story. Leonardo da Vinci himself brought the painting to France in the early 16th century, about 250 years before Napoleon. He gave it, or sold it, to the French King Francis I. It had been legally in France for centuries.
So Peruggia either didn't know that, or he was deliberately twisting history for his defense.
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe he genuinely believed the Napoleon story he'd heard from colleagues, but historians definitely question the purity of his patriotic motive. If it was all about national pride, why try to sell it? Why contact a dealer using a fake name and ask for money?
Right. Why not just leave it on the steps of the Uffizi anonymously if it was purely about returning it?
Exactly. The demand for a reward really undercuts the pure patriot narrative.
And there's evidence suggesting financial gain was on his mind much earlier, isn't there? Letters he wrote.
There is, and it's pretty compelling. Just 4 months after the theft, way back in late 1911, he wrote a letter to his father back in Italy.
What did it say?
He basically said that Paris was the place he was going to make my fortune, and that he was close to realizing a prize that would benefit the whole family. It strongly implies he saw the Mona Lisa as his winning lottery ticket from early on.
Did he mention specific plans? Trying to sell it to rich collectors or something?
His notebooks apparently contained lists of potential buyers, including famous American millionaires like Rockefeller and Carnegie. And we know he definitely tried to offload it earlier. He even traveled to London at one point.
What, sell it in London?
Yeah, approached a major art dealer there, a man named Duveen. Apparently Duveen just laughed him out of his office, probably thought he was crazy or dealing with the copy.
So he had these grand plans for a huge payday, tried to execute them, failed miserably, couldn't even pay his hotel bill when he was arrested in Florence. It doesn't sound like a criminal mastermind.
Not even close. Which leads to how he managed to get such a light sentence. The Italian public was largely sympathetic, seeing him as this naive patriot. But there was also this assessment of his mental state.
Ah, yes, the psychiatrist's evaluation. Tell us about that.
Right. The court appointed a psychiatrist, Dr. Paolo Ramaldi, to evaluate Peruggia's intelligence. Amaldi used a classic simple riddle. He asked Peruggia, there are two birds sitting in a tree. A hunter comes along and shoots one of them. How many birds are left in the tree?
Okay. A simple logic test. What did Peruggia answer?
He answered one.
One. Not zero, because the other bird would fly away from the gunshot.
Exactly. That was the expected logical answer. Peruggia's simple one led Dr. Amaldi to conclude in his report that Peruggia was, quote, mentally deficient, or essentially an imbecile.
So that diagnosis, combined with the public support for his supposed patriotism.
It worked wonders for him in court. They granted him extenuating circumstances. He was initially sentenced to just over a year, but it was quickly reduced, and he ended up serving only about 7 months.
7 months in jail for stealing the Mona Lisa. That's astonishingly lenient. So the imbecile defense, or maybe just the classic loser label, fits better than master thief.
I think so. Donald Sassoon, who wrote a fantastic book about the painting's history, summed him up as, quite clearly, a classic loser. More like someone who stumbles into notoriety, like maybe a Lee Harvey Oswald type, rather than a calculated criminal genius.
And we should probably mention that other theory, the more complex conspiracy one.
Right, the Valfierno theory. It surfaced years later in 1932. A journalist claimed the whole theft was actually orchestrated by a South American con man, Eduardo di Valfierno.
What was the supposed plan?
The idea was Valfierno hired Peruggia to steal the real Mona Lisa, not to sell the original, but to create hype and authenticity for 6 high-quality forgeries that Valfierno had commissioned from a French art restorer named Yves Chaudron.
Ah, so while the world searched for the real one, Valfierno could quietly sell the fakes to rich collectors, each believing they had the stolen original.
That's the theory. If true, it makes Peruggia just an unwitting pawn in a much larger, more cynical game. Valfierno supposedly paid Peruggia a small sum and then disappeared, leaving Peruggia holding the real painting, which Valfierno never actually wanted back.
It's a fascinating theory, though largely unproven.
Mostly unsubstantiated, yeah. But it adds another layer of intrigue to the whole story. Was Peruggia a naive patriot, a greedy loser, or just a tool for someone else?
Whatever he was, his moment of fame was brief. What happened to him after he got out of jail?
His life pretty much returned to the obscurity he came from. After his short sentence, he served in the Italian army during World War I. He was actually captured and spent about 2 years as an Austrian prisoner of war.
And after the war?
He eventually went back to France, surprisingly, settled down, married, had a daughter, and he went back to his old trade, working as a painter and decorator. But he used his birth name, Pietro Peruggia.
So he lived out his life quietly, under his real first name.
Yeah. He died relatively young, actually. Had a heart attack on his 44th birthday, October 8th, 1925, in a town just outside Paris.
And nobody really noticed his death, because he wasn't Vincenzo anymore.
Exactly. His death went largely unreported at the time. The man who committed arguably the most famous art theft in history died in near total anonymity. A really quiet end.
So wrapping this up, What's the big takeaway here? It's this incredible paradox, isn't it? The most famous painting in the world owes its celebrity status, its universal recognition, to this incredibly simple crime.
Committed by a man who was, well, conflicted, maybe naive, certainly not a mastermind. Peruggia himself faded completely into the background of history.
Yet his act, the theft itself, is still constantly referenced in movies, songs. He was even a big feature in the Paris 2024 Olympics opening ceremony, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Celebrating the return of the Joconde.
Right. The act endures even as the actor vanished.
It really makes you think. And maybe leaves us with one final question for you, the listener, to ponder.
Peruggia himself apparently wrote or said later that if he just wanted money, he knew the Louvre well enough. He could have easily stolen something smaller, much more valuable in sheer material terms, like maybe the Regent diamond, which is 140 carats, or gold artifacts he could melt down. Things that wouldn't be instantly recognizable, things he could sell without becoming world famous overnight.
Good point. Stealing those would have been profitable, but maybe anonymous.
Exactly. So, considering he chose the Mona Lisa, the one object guaranteed to make him instantly globally infamous, even if incredibly hard to sell, what do we think his real prize was? Was it just about the potential money tied to that specific painting? Or was the ultimate reward, perhaps consciously or subconsciously, the notoriety itself, the fame that came with stealing the most recognizable face in the world?